Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Somewhat Scholarly. My name is Alan Hibbard, and today we are exploring 10 reasons to be bullish on Bitcoin. And I have a lot more than 10 reasons. I have a ton, so I had to write really small, and I consolidated them into 10 groups. So let's start with number 10 and work our way to number 1. Fundamentals. So basically Bitcoin's fundamentals. It is, of course, secure and decentralized. And I've got this little triangle here, the trade-off triangle, the blockchain trilemma. If you don't know what this is, you gotta learn about it. Okay, you got to check out my video. I'll put it in the description. Basically, Bitcoin is not scalable on purpose. It is secure and decentralized. So check out that video. Secondly here, Bitcoin is portable, durable, divisible, fungible, unit of account, medium of exchange, store of value, right? It's money. It's money. Bitcoin is money. So that's part of its fundamentals. That's what it is. And it's easy to overlook that, but it is a huge reason that I'm bullish on Bitcoin. It's also open. Anybody can use it. Public. Anybody can look at it. Immutable. Nobody can change it unless they do the work. Uncensorable, right? And it's money. So this is huge. This is huge. Like, this is why Bitcoin is even relevant. It's how it has grown in popularity. It's how I even found out about it, right? If it didn't have these properties, I probably wouldn't know about it. You probably wouldn't know about it. It probably would have been relegated to the dustbin of history by now. Okay, so its fundamentals are so huge. It's the reason we're even having a conversation about it. Also, saving versus spending. Like, the utility of Bitcoin is to save it, which sounds weird, and it sounds like, well, that's just a pyramid scheme or something like that, right? I understand. But, you know, the world needs a way to save their energy across long periods of time and distances, actually, for that matter. And Bitcoin is a savings vehicle. That's what money is, as opposed to currency, which is a spending vehicle. So if you don't know the difference between the two, well, I don't blame you because very few people are talking about it, but I will link to that video in the description. That's a longer video, I think about 40 minutes, but it is so packed full of good stuff, and it's basically what I've learned over the last 10 years studying money, finance, and value. And I even have an MBA in finance and learned zero of it doing that. So it all comes from other people, books, videos, podcasts, and so forth. It's very important. You got to understand money versus currency. It's so fundamental. So go watch that video and watch it more than once if you need to. Finally here, need versus want. So people need a way to store their value. In other words, they need money. So I would argue that people need something like Bitcoin. Something like Bitcoin. If it's not exactly Bitcoin, they need something to store their value. It just so happens there's no alternatives. I mean, there's gold, right? There's gold. That's a physical thing. Bitcoin's obviously digital. So they're complementary in that way. But the world needs a digital store of value, right, that has these other properties, immutable, uncensorable, blah, blah, blah. The world needs that. We have to have that. Everything else in the crypto space is a want. It's a want, like instant settlement, zero fees, smart contracts. Okay, those are nice. Like, it would be great if we could have them, but nobody needs a smart contract. Nobody needs zero fees. Nobody needs zero settlement time. So anyways, very, very important fundamentals here. Huge reason that I'm bullish on Bitcoin, but it gets better. Okay, number 9, knowledge gap. Man, this is huge. Bitcoin versus Bitcoin Cash, BSV, XRP, and everything else, right? It's kind of like what I just said. Bitcoin doesn't have competitors. It doesn't have competitors. It is purposefully not scalable. So all these coins that are saying we have to make Bitcoin, more scalable, or we need a more scalable version than Bitcoin, there's a knowledge gap here. There's a misunderstanding among either the developers or the users or whatever about what Bitcoin is and what the world needs and so forth. There's a huge knowledge gap there. However, people are crossing the gap, one at a time, slowly but surely. So eventually people are realizing, oh man, okay, Bitcoin was designed to be slow, and it's actually a good thing because it's more secure, more decentralized, blah, blah, blah. So people are figuring that out, and it's a huge reason that I'm bullish on Bitcoin because, people are figuring it out. So anyways, Bitcoin doesn't have competitors, which is so bizarre, but it doesn't. Bitcoin is also not the first digital currency. A lot of people are saying, it's pretty unlikely that the first digital currency is going to succeed. It's basically like the MySpace of currencies, or whatever comparison they want to use. And Bitcoin is not the first digital currency. If you read the white paper, Satoshi even references Hashcash, right, which came before. And if you do a little bit of online research, you can find like a dozen or more digital currencies that came before Bitcoin, some 10, 20, or 30 years before Bitcoin. And they failed because they sucked. They had problems, right? I mean, they're way better than I could do, so I don't mean to criticize them that way. But the reason you haven't heard about them is because they just weren't popular. They didn't really achieve, something useful for society. But Bitcoin has succeeded. It continues to succeed, and it's because it has achieved so many useful things, actually. So anyways, most criticisms of Bitcoin are misunderstandings. This is huge. Like, oh, Bitcoin's too slow. Well, okay, that's not a criticism, it's a misunderstanding, right? In other words, it's a feature, not a bug, right? Common phrase. So most most criticisms of Bitcoin are just misunderstandings. People don't realize it's supposed to be slow and kind of expensive to transact and kind of inefficient and use a lot of energy and all these other things. It's actually deliberate. Most better coins are actually different tribes. Yeah, most better coins are actually different tribes. So when people say like, oh, this coin is so much better than Bitcoin because it blah, 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 from my observation, right, so this is just one person's perspective, but from my observation, a lot of those people who are advocating those other coins seem to enjoy the tribe of others who also like that coin, and then they rationalize the fundamentals of the coin after the fact. But they don't realize they're doing it that way. So I think a lot of people, again, it's an awareness issue and partly a knowledge gap. As humans, we make emotional decisions first, and then we rationalize them after the fact, but we're not really aware that we do that. So I think a lot of people find a tribe, right? Find an altcoin community that has the values that resonate with them, and then they argue that their coin is the best. And so I think, eventually people will consider that perspective. They will learn about other coins. They'll learn more about Bitcoin and a lot of these other fundamentals, and they'll also see a lot of these other things that take place over time and perhaps change their minds. So, and again, I acknowledge the fact that I could be wrong too. I'm aware that this also applies to me, so thank you. All right, number 8, design. Antifragile versus fragile. And I also have here a reminder to give you a quote by Nassim Nicholas Taleb. So Nassim Nicholas Taleb wrote the book Antifragile. If you have not read it, I encourage you to check it out. Very important work. Something that's anti-fragile gets stronger when it is stressed, as opposed to something fragile, which breaks when it's stressed. So like if you have a glass, turns out I have one here. Yes, a glass of water. This is a fragile thing because if I were to drop it, from a high enough point, it would break. So it's fragile. However, a human, if you drop a human from that same point, I don't know, 6 feet or 10 feet or something, it would hurt, right? They might break a bone or I don't know, depends how they fall, but they probably wouldn't die. And after they heal, they would get stronger. So humans get stronger from stress because humans are anti-fragile, whereas objects like a cup are fragile. Now, this is relevant to Bitcoin because Bitcoin is anti-fragile. It gets stronger from stress. So you attack the network, it gets stronger. You ban it in your country, it gets stronger. You criticize it on Twitter, right? It gets stronger, right? You're not going to shut it down because you're angry about it. However, government currencies are fragile. They're fragile. So, if your country gets invaded, your currency disappears and it gets replaced by the invading country's currency. If you debase your currency, like in a literal sense, back when it was metals like gold and silver, if you actually debase it with base metals, you debase your currency into oblivion and it disappears. Modern version of that is the printing press. You hyperinflate a currency to zero and it disappears and people stop using it. Or, of course, the government can just declare, we're not going to use this currency anymore. We're going to use a different one. So there are all these fragile events that could take place that make these government currencies disappear. And the quote I wanted to share with you is that it is easier to determine if something is fragile than to predict the occurrence of an event that would harm it. So it's very easy for me to say, like, yeah, that glass right there, it's fragile, right? I can determine that it's fragile very easily. However, if I try to predict when is an event going to happen that breaks that glass, that's like really hard to predict. It might never happen. It might be 20 years from now, might be tomorrow, might be later in this video. I don't know. So it's really hard to predict the event that breaks the glass, but it's very easy to say that that glass is breakable. The same is true with government currencies. So I don't know what is going to cause the US dollar to break, but I know that it is breakable. Same is true of the British pound, the euro, the Japanese yen. I mean, you name it, all these government currencies are fragile. It's very easy to say, like, fragile, 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 fragile. They're all going to break eventually. But I have no idea which one's going to break first or what's going to cause it or whatever, and it doesn't matter. I just don't want the fragile stuff. So that's super powerful to understand. The design of Bitcoin is such that it is anti-fragile. It grows from stress because it's decentralized. Incentives to cooperate, for example, a 51% attack. So the incentives of Bitcoin are such that, miners that get a large percentage of the hashing power are incentivized to actually cooperate because they can earn more money from maintaining the network honestly and mining more Bitcoins than they would get if they attacked the network and then tried to double spend some Bitcoins. So the incentives are aligned very nicely. Also, there have been some coins in the past where the miners have the mining pools have accidentally gotten more than 51% of the hashing power and just voluntarily said, all right, some of us are going to go to this other mining pool. That way there is no 51% attack and the community doesn't have to worry about it. So that's super cool. Just knowing that has happened in the past, that there's honest ways of doing it. Those two things combined, that the incentives are such that you don't want to attack the network. And we've seen examples of human beings, running mining operations that have voluntarily chosen to sort of spread out the concentration of power. So that makes me very excited. The developer community, really, really strong, really vibrant in the Bitcoin space, and it's easy to update things. I can't even tell you how many times Bitcoin has been updated, but a lot of people think it was just created once and then it's just out there. And that's not true. It gets updated all the time. I mean, you can look online at the GitHub repository and see all the BIPs, the Bitcoin improvement proposals. So, I think there will be a way to make Bitcoin quantum resistant. I don't know enough about quantum computing, and I don't know enough about, the Bitcoin code, but my gut tells me there will be a way to do it. Maybe I'm wrong, but I have faith. Finally, Bitcoin will outlast every fiat currency. Okay, this is a prediction, right? I don't know it for sure, but it goes back to what I said at the beginning here, anti-fragile versus fragile. There is a very serious probability, right? Non-zero, right? There's a very serious probability that Bitcoin survives longer than every government currency that's currently on the planet. And several have already died in the last 12 years, right, since Bitcoin was created. So it is possible that Bitcoin lives longer than the US dollar. It's possible that Bitcoin lives longer than the pound, the yen, the whatever. It's possible that Bitcoin lives longer than all of those. There's profound implications for that. It also means you can't really measure the price of Bitcoin. Well, but is Bitcoin going to reach $100,000 or $1 million or well, what if the dollar doesn't exist? I mean, Bitcoin could reach infinity dollars, infinity pounds, infinity yen, infinity whatever. And when you realize that that's possible, you stop measuring it in fiat. It's why would I even bother? I don't want the fiat. I just want the Bitcoins. So, anyways, that's just a prediction. It's not a guarantee, obviously. I don't even have high conviction that that's going to happen, but it is certainly a very real possibility, and it's a important thought experiment, right? You don't need to bet on whether or not it's going to happen. Who cares? I mean, that could also be 100 years from now. it's more of a thought experiment because there's profound implications for, what could happen along the way. All right, number 7, social proof. This isn't so much important for me necessarily. I just know that it's important for a lot of other people. So, I love Bitcoin. Obviously, I'm making videos on it. I study it all the time. I'm writing a book on it. So just because a famous investor or a celebrity or someone says, hey, I bought Bitcoin, that doesn't mean a whole lot for me personally, but I know it means a lot for other people. And speaking of celebrities, there was, what's her name? The woman who plays Arya Stark in Game of Thrones. Maisie Williams, perhaps? I should have looked it up before the video. Anyways, she just published a poll on Twitter and asked her followers, she has like over 1 million followers, should I buy Bitcoin? Yes or no? And it came back roughly 50-50 with a slight edge for no. And she replied to her tweet and she says, well, I bought it anyway. So, so I guess she's a Bitcoiner now. And I think that's that type of thing. And I know it happened with J.K. Rowling, author of Harry Potter, earlier in 2020. I don't know if she actually bought Bitcoin or not, but she was asking about it or something. But it's that type of thing that is going to bring a lot of people into the Bitcoin space, for better or worse, right? Make sure you do your own research. But yeah, investors, celebrities, and family and friends, like it's getting to the point where everyone has a friend who owns Bitcoin. It's getting there. I don't know exactly, obviously, but, social proof is big. Like a lot of people don't want to spend the time to like read a bunch of books on Bitcoin, listen to a bunch of podcasts, watch a bunch of videos, blah, 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 blah. But if they have a friend who they trust and that friend is into Bitcoin, they're like, okay, then I'll buy it too. So that's really big. That's happening more and more. I only expect that to continue as we go. Social proof is really big. Number 6, government. Okay, failed attempts to ban Bitcoin and other things. So, you can look at alcohol prohibition in the United States, how terrible that was. Like the number of speakeasies increased during prohibition, right? And obviously the intention was to make them go away. You could look at marijuana, you could look at prostitution, you can look at anything all over the world. It's like if people want something, then banning it doesn't really have an effect other than to increase the black market for that thing. So, we've seen a couple governments already try to ban Bitcoin, like India, China did something. I forget exactly what they banned. Anyways, there's a whole bunch of countries that have tried banning either Bitcoin mining or just using Bitcoin or whatever, and they've pretty much all unanimously realized, well, that didn't accomplish anything, and usage only went up, and mining only went up, and whatever. Okay, so we repeal our ban, or we're just not going to enforce it, or whatever. So, it's interesting that we have a history of failed government bans for Bitcoin and for other things. That makes me bullish on Bitcoin. It's like they might not even try, right? I live in the United States, so the U.S. government might not try to ban it, but if they do, I don't see a lot of Bitcoin hodlers just selling their Bitcoins and being like, okay, government, I guess I won't use Bitcoin. I just don't see it happening. Lockdowns. We're what, at the end of November in 2020. It's been a crazy year. Coronavirus, lockdowns, this state, that state, we're open, we're closed, we're partially open, we're totally closed. It's been all over the place. It's been absolutely horrible for businesses to do any kind of planning. It's been absolute chaos. And there are a lot of people who advocate lockdowns. Okay, we should have more lockdowns. Lockdowns are good. They should be stricter, or whatever, right? A lot of people have that view. That's fine. However, that's not Bitcoin's target market, right? Those people probably don't own Bitcoin, and they're probably not going to anytime soon. But the reason this is here is because there's a large number of people who are realizing that they don't like the government overreach. That, I don't like, I'm just trying to run my barber shop and the government's telling me I can't be open. Or I'm just trying to, have a bar or a sporting goods store or whatever it is. And the government says I can't be open, or I can be open, but I can only have one customer, or, I don't like that. And I would like to find another way to earn income where the government can't just say you have to stop right now. So a lot of people are moving that direction. It's really accelerating Bitcoin education and Bitcoin adoption. So that's, very bullish for Bitcoin. There's also a movement to increase global government. I don't know how much you guys have been watching it over the past several years, but there seems to be a growing number of global issues that would suggest that we should have more global governments. Whether you perceive them as legitimate or not doesn't really matter. My only point for today is that those issues keep coming up, and they keep being portrayed as bigger and bigger issues. One of them obviously is coronavirus. One is climate change, terrorism, right? There's all these things like, well, we need a global government. We need a global program to do this. We need a global whatever. So whether you agree that that's good or bad does not matter, but there are a lot of people who are saying all this government is not not so good in my opinion. So again, accelerating Bitcoin education and adoption. World War III is cyber financial, and it is happening now. I think that was Jim Rickards who first made that point, that World War III is already happening, and that it's a cyber financial war. And I think he said this a couple years ago. Basically, it's not guns and bombs and, invading foreign soil. It's, hacking. It's hacking elections, for example, hacking stock markets, hacking bank accounts, hacking these types of things in like extremely sophisticated ways that I'm not sure I understand, to be honest. But I understand that there's a lot of things that could be done in theory. So I don't know if that's true or not. It doesn't really matter. It seems plausible to an extent, and I'm not sure which countries are on which team or what. Who knows? But I think that as we hear more and more stories about cyber attacks and cyber hackings and whatever, I think a lot of people are going to start paying attention to the security of their digital assets. And most dollars are digital. Stocks, right? Brokerage accounts, retirements accounts, all these things, they're all digital assets. And so it's very bullish for Bitcoin, in my opinion, because people are going to want to get these things outside the reach of the conventional mainstream financial network and put them into their own custody. So very, very bullish for Bitcoin. Okay, let's see here. Number 5, macro environment. Money printer go burr. Yes, big time. A lot of money printing for all different reasons, all different countries, all over the world. And people are starting to realize, like, wait, if the government just prints money, why am I paying taxes? Right? Like, if they can just print it to fund whatever, why am I paying taxes? And as they just keep printing, people are realizing that it's going to take more of those things, dollars, euros, yens, whatever, in order to buy stuff. And people are starting to ask questions about money and currency and figure out what fiat means and what sound money is. And this is extremely, extremely bullish for Bitcoin. Bubbles in stocks and bonds. I mean, these assets have been overvalued for at least a decade, generally speaking, right? Not every single stock, not every single bond, but as an asset class, these have been overvalued for a long time. And they may continue to be overvalued for some time. I'm actually kind of surprised how long it's been. I thought we would have had a crash by now. But we will get a crash eventually, and it's going to be extremely painful. And that money has to go somewhere, right? So, when you exchange $100 for a stock, it's like you get the stock, but someone else has the $100. What are they going to do with the $100? It has to go somewhere. So we'll see. I think Bitcoin will be one place that a lot of this fiat goes. Emergency monetary policy to infinity. In the United States, we've had like abnormally low interest rates for 12 years or more. I mean, depending how you count it. And that's like an emergency monetary policy. Like, oh, the economy's on life support. Let's drop interest rates. And we've got negative interest rates, all over the world, different places. This is an emergency, and yet we're saying like, oh, the economy is the best it's ever been. At least Trump is claiming that in the United States. I mean, that's total garbage. Very interesting to say the least. And we've had this emergency monetary policy for a very long time, and it's become like the new normal. And there's no end in sight, right? But that's an emergency monetary policy. So it's all a recipe for, you know, a very fragile network to come crashing down. Finally, debt plus debt plus debt plus debt plus more debt. It seems like debt is just a solution to every problem that we're seeing now. Like, oh, we can't pay our bills as a country? Well, let's borrow more money and then we can make our payments. Well, okay, but if that's the problem, how is debt the solution? But nobody wants to, like, use logic. It's all just about, like, okay, more debt. Yeah. Oh, we have a virus. Okay, let's just borrow a bunch of money and then give it to everybody. That seems like it should work. Okay, we have, you know, the stock market's down. Okay, let's borrow some money and then pump it in, and then it's craziness, right? The debt is extremely high in the United States, and it gets bigger with every single presidential administration. So if you look back at, you know, every 4-year block, even for like 2-term presidents like Barack Obama, every 4-year block adds more debt than the previous 4-year block, regardless of Democrat or Republican, right? It's just debt. Just, it's like, how much debt can we accumulate? Well, we're going to find out how much how much debt we can accumulate, because not much more. And I know a very similar thing is happening in major countries around the world. There is a huge debt problem. Debt to GDP, you know, the ratio of debt to the annual GDP in the United States, I think, is over 130% now. Probably will be much higher than that by the time 2020 ends and we get those numbers, you know, a few months later. So, yeah, I mean, that's terrible. That's terrible for the country. Bullish for Bitcoin. So, bittersweet. Number 4, technicals. 8 cycles of Bitcoin. If you haven't seen my last video, my price prediction for 2020 or 2021, you got to check that out. You can see the 8 cycles of Bitcoin, how it moves in the same type of cycle over and over and over again. That's the only thing it's done, is like repeat these cycles. Very bullish. Very bullish. I think we're on the brink of just like rocket ship straight up. The question is, how high? A lot of people don't know there was a 1-day crash of Bitcoin and it didn't die. This is many years ago. I think 2012. I think it was 2012, maybe 2013. And Bitcoin was trading around $17, and it was when Mt. Gox was hacked, and the price of Bitcoin dropped down to a penny, and then it recovered back to its price from earlier that day, $17, in a single day. Right, it was down to a penny, stayed there, and then back up to $17. So if you look at the daily closing prices, you don't even know that crash happened. But, you know, if you look at intraday prices, or if you find that video, I'll find that video and put it in the description. It's someone else's video, but it was a guy who was showing his computer screen as it was happening in real time. I think it's like an 8-minute video. You can just watch him speculate on what caused it. Concavity is safe haven, not risk. I have not shown this in a video before, but I will do it next. My next video will be what makes Bitcoin digital gold, like what makes Bitcoin like gold. And this is one of the points, the concavity of the price action. So from your perspective, Bitcoin kind of drops down like this or goes sideways and then shoots up, and then it does it again, right? That's part of the cycles that I'm talking about when I say that it's done 8 cycles. That movement is the same as gold. Basically, you know, slow down and over and then up like a rocket. That's how gold moves as well. That's the movement of a safe haven asset. A risk asset is very different. It actually goes up to start and then rolls over and then spikes down. And then it goes up, and over, and then spikes down. And that's a risk asset like stocks. So if you look at the S&P 500, that's basically the movement that it's taken for the last 100 years. Obviously, you know, different magnitudes and stuff, but that's the movement. So it's very interesting that the market, meaning every single person on earth, including you and me, every single person, lovers of Bitcoin, haters of Bitcoin, people who short it, everything, everybody combined, the world, the world's consensus on Bitcoin is that it is a safe haven asset. That's how it trades. It trades the same way as gold. And that's amazing. A lot of people don't know that. That will be my next video. So the concavity is a safe haven type of concavity, not a risk asset. So despite its volatility, it trades like a safe haven. I know it's very weird, but I'll show you in the next video. So if you want to see that, make sure you subscribe. Okay. Most BTC hasn't moved in over a year. I forget the exact number, 60-something% of Bitcoin hasn't moved in over a year. So that's super bullish. I mean, it's not like people are just, day trading it. They're hodlers. So that means that the available supply to buy, right, when all this stuff happens and all the people come storming in, the available supply is going to be tiny. So that is bullish. All right, number 3, value, utility, basically using it for its properties that we start over here by talking about fundamentals, especially censorship resistance. So in Africa, South America, Middle East, there's people in countries all over who are using Bitcoin to store their value so that the government can't steal it via inflation, right? So that cartels can't just physically take it, from their house or something like that. There's so many examples. It's so inspiring to hear. I mean, you can just search. There's like a million articles out there. But it is incredible to see people actually using it. And when I first heard about women in the Middle East who started using Bitcoin to be entrepreneurs, that is one of the things that really made me, that like flipped a switch in my brain, like, oh, huge use case, like women who aren't allowed to own property by law and they feel like they're being oppressed, and this is like a source of personal empowerment for them. Wow, that is huge. And that's one of the realizations I had, years ago, I think 2013, 2014. Yeah, and this use case is only rising around the world, but you just don't hear about it that often because we talk about other things in the mainstream media. Also, WikiLeaks, basically, obviously an older story, but they started using Bitcoin because their conventional financial services were cut off, right? They couldn't use a normal bank account because they were doing bad things, right? They weren't allowed to, so they got around that. And similar thing with Iran, facing sanctions from the United States, like they're not allowed to export their energy, and they're like, well, yeah, we want to do that. We're not doing anything wrong. We're exporting energy. So they're using Bitcoin. They're turning their energy into Bitcoins by mining Bitcoin, and then it's very easy to move Bitcoins around the world. So this is at an individual level, company level, country level. It's happening. People are using it. They don't think they're doing anything wrong, and there's some oppressive regime that's trying to control them, and they're just asserting their independence. And it's such a beautiful thing, in my opinion, to watch, and it makes me very bullish on Bitcoin. Number 2, phases, the different phases of Bitcoin. How has Bitcoin evolved over time? And there's like a lot of different layers of phases. So at first, Bitcoin went from a medium of exchange, I guess like buying pizzas, buying 2 pizzas for 10,000 Bitcoins. Went from a medium of exchange to a store of value, and I think it's going to move very quickly to a reserve asset. We've seen MicroStrategies come in, Square. I did not write those here, but yeah. They're using them for cash on their balance sheet. Cash. They're not investing in Bitcoin. They're using Bitcoin as their cash. Super important. Individuals, companies, countries, as the market cap of Bitcoin grows, at first it only makes sense for individuals to use it, right? When it's like a penny per coin or whatever, it only makes sense for individuals. But then once it gets large enough in terms of market cap, it makes sense for companies to start using it, like WikiLeaks and so forth. And then as it becomes even bigger, it makes sense for countries to start using it, like Iran or whatever. And the market cap right now is over 350 billion. And, as it hits $1 trillion, right, 2 trillion, 10 trillion, whatever, it's going to make a lot more sense for, nation states to put a percentage of their assets into Bitcoin. But while Bitcoin is relatively small, like it is now, I would say, it doesn't make sense for countries to do that. Or maybe some are doing it secretly, but a very small percentage of their assets. Anyway, so those are the phases as they develop. It is very exciting. Another one here, quote by Gandhi, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win. So those are the other phases of Bitcoin. Bitcoin people were ignored for a long time, then they were laughed at, and then people started fighting them like, oh, you're not allowed, regulation and all these other things. And I don't know where we're at, if we're in fighting or win, but Visa, MasterCard, PayPal, JP Morgan, a lot of other banks have sort of capitulated, and they're embracing Bitcoin. Whereas for a while they said, oh, this is stupid, it's horrible technology, dumb, it's a joke. And now they're all embracing it. So very interesting to see that. The last thing I have here is gradually, then suddenly, the slow march of the inevitable. So, yeah, gradually, then suddenly. And it is inevitable. Like, just one person at a time. That's it. One person at a time, right? You don't need global adoption all in a single day. You just need one person. And after that, one more person. After that, one more person. Same thing with companies, same thing with countries. Very, very exciting to see. Finally, my number one reason, and thank you guys for those of you who have watched to the end here. Number one reason is the values. Bitcoin is a peaceful revolution. You can opt out of all the nonsense you don't believe in, whether it's coming from governments or a religion or just a group or a cartel, it doesn't matter. You can opt out peacefully. That's so beautiful that you have that choice. So beautiful. Bitcoin is an idea. It's an idea. So if we have a problem with the current software version, we'll update it or, do some kind of innovation. But the idea for a global, secure, decentralized, portable, durable, blah, 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 immutable, uncensorable store of value, that's an idea you can't kill. Like, we're going to have that. The world needs it. There is going to be one of them. And if the current version, has a problem, the idea is not going to die. We'll replace it. I also like the values that Bitcoin is 100% optional. You opt in, you opt out. You can be a miner or not. You can be a merchant or not. You can be a user or not, a developer or not, whatever. You just no one has a gun to your head and says you must use Bitcoin, or you have to be a developer, or you can't be a developer, or whatever. Totally optional. So I love the values that go into that. Calm versus anxious. This one might sound kind of weird, calm versus anxious, but this is how you feel when you're on sound money versus when you're on fiat. People who are on fiat don't realize it, but they have this state of anxiety, a tiny state of anxiety operating in them 24/7, 365. It's that feeling like you just can't get ahead financially, or like you're trying to catch up, or you're trying to get ahead, and you're like, if I get a 3% raise this year, and then if I do this, and then I do this, and then I get another job, and then if I go get this training and I get this degree, then I'll qualify for this other job, and you're just like trying to get ahead, and you're scrambling, and that is a product of a fiat monetary system. It might seem like a total leap, and if it's something you've never thought of, it might seem totally false to you. But I really do believe that once you switch yourself to a sound money system, you're just calmer. You're not worried about getting ahead. I'm not worried about getting ahead. Like, I haven't even had a job like in a couple years because I've been on sound money. And so I don't feel the need to get ahead. It's very different. It's hard to explain, but once you feel it, you will never go back. You will never go back. So, calm versus anxious. It's very, very important. I think if you want to build a healthy society, like mentally healthy, physically healthy, and financially healthy, you got to build it on sound money. It's so critical. Finally, the revealed values of the Bitcoin tribe. Different Bitcoiners. Obviously, there's not 100% of them, but different Bitcoiners. I do like their values as people, and you can see how many of them. You can see how many of them believe from the way they act. Let me put it that way. Yeah, so I do like a lot of people in the Bitcoin space. Obviously, there are some Bitcoiners that I don't get along with very well, but it's not because of Bitcoin. So anyways, thank you guys for watching. Hope you found it helpful. Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you want to see my next video, what makes Bitcoin digital gold, make sure you subscribe. Thanks, guys. See you next week.